It's the Instant REAX podcast for week number 9. The regular season now officially in the books. Quincy game just went final. So that's the last score, I think, from our area. So now, what do we call this? I'm joined by Kyle Kampmeyer and Mitch Stormer here. What do we call this? Is this like the preview to the playoff preview?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Mitch was in deep thought about it. Kyle had the instant reacts, you might say, Kyle had there. So I think the playoff preview is tomorrow in the NUIC football headquarters. I'll be making my trip to the heart of NUIC country, joining Kyle Kampmeyer and Joe Meridian for the NUIC football playoff preview show. But like I said, tonight's kind of the preview to the preview. So if you listen to this, then make sure to join us on YouTube, Saturday at 7:00.
Well, and like your show tomorrow night is kind of like the instant reacts to the playoff pairings. And then you and I are going to do an instant reacts to the instant reacts. So there's a lot of things happening here, a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of content coming your way here.
That's right. Days. A ton of content. It's the best. It's the most wonderful time of the year, Mitch, as we would say here on the podcast. We would say it, but we'd get in trouble. So
we wouldn't sing it or play an audio clip from it, but we would sing.
No. Well, like I said, week 9 in the books here. Mitch, I was at home tonight, and I jumped in because you were busy, with family. So I jumped into Twitter, jumped onto the
fifth grade volleyball, Greg. Fifth grade volleyball. I was not with the family.
Okay. How did it go?
It was great. They were all the games were best of 3, and they all played 2 games. So that was perfect. No extra time tonight.
There you go. So as you're watching the 5th grade volleyball, I'm jumping in to play the role of Mitch Stormer, and holy cow, it's been a while since I've been in on Twitter, and after I see you week in and week out the way you do it, I tried for a quarter, and I couldn't keep up. I was swimming. I was overwhelmed. Finally, you texted, and Superman to the rescue. Yep. You jumped in, and thank God, because I was drowning over here.
It takes a lot of retweets of Kyle's tweets to make Friday nights work.
Which we found out those retweets are actually coming from Kyle's better half. So
that's right.
Now we know who does the heavy lifting on Friday nights here. I'm walking the sidelines covering one game normally. Same with Kyle. And I can, when there's multiple scores being fired at you at the same time, it was overwhelming. So Mitch, like we said, week 9 in the books, and there are 3 teams from our, coverage area here that can claim 9 wins in 9 weeks. We got Quincy, the Blue Devils go 9-0. We got Lena Winslow from the Northwest Upstate Illini, and we got Stark County. So there you go. There's our 3 undefeated teams from the area. Oh, we should include Amboy from the 8-man ranks as well.
Right.
Amboy also unbeaten. I don't think we forgot anyone. I think that's our unbeatens.
Yeah, no unbeatens, just a lot of 8-1 teams though too. Princeton, Rockridge, Kewanee, Morrison, Anne Arundel Wethersfield, and that's it. So yeah, a lot of good football. But we said just before we started recording that might be a low for us in terms of unbeaten teams. We'd have to go back and look, but
it feels like it.
3 seems low, but we're still going to get a hefty number of playoff teams, and that's what we like to see more than anything.
Yep. Well, let's jump in and talk. First of all, Kyle, welcome into the show here. You were covering the one of the 8-man teams that remains unbeaten there in Amboy. We'll get to that one down the way, but how is the Friday night looking? Because besides covering the Northwest Upstate Illini in Amboy tonight, you're our bracketologist. Friday Night Drive has the Seuss, but our resident bracketologist is right here in Kyle Kampmeyer. So what are we seeing? Any general overviews, scores that stand out? Thursday night kind of shook some things up a little bit.
Yeah, Thursday night shook some things up, and going into tonight, there was still the possibility of 2, 4, and 5 teams getting in. Well, a couple of those 4 and 4 teams that were projected to win did win, but there was a couple others that were projected to win that lost, which could give us even a few more 4 and 5 at-large teams to get into the playoffs this year. Granted, some of those teams are going to be at the upper levels. One of the teams that we were talking about was Brother Rice, but they did win, so we don't have to worry about them. And there's a couple things I still need to take a look at because the CPL kind of did some things differently this year than what they've done in years past. So it's kind of thrown a ratchet into a few things, mainly in my brackets above 3A. So, but it still plays an effect because you got to take some of these teams in and out to get the correct teams into the field, and that can make adjustments on which 5-4s or 4-5s get in and all that good stuff. So,
I
a little bit of balancing out I got to do yet.
I give you credit. I don't know how you keep up with it, man. It is impressive. Mitch, you're not doing that kind of legwork either. So
No, not at all. I was going to say though, because we talked about this earlier, Kyle. Lamont won. They did not lose. They beat whoever TF North is. They won 19-18. So I know you mentioned that game as one of those games that might sway a few things here or there, but they won that game. Taking a look around, like Deer Creek Mackinac won tonight to get to 5-4. I don't want to scroll through everything.
That was a big one.
Effingham won. I don't even know what class they're in, but I'm just looking at 4-4 teams that won tonight. Rockford Lutheran beat Genoa Kingston. That was a big one.
I think I had Rockford Lutheran picked.
So yeah, I don't want to go through all these results because I don't know what class they're in, and again, not everyone's final. But yeah, it's gonna get interesting here in the next 24 hours for sure.
yeah. Well, before we kind of jump into the bracketology, I think we should go through the scores because Mitch, you kind of pointed out that by the time we get to next Tuesday when we release the next regular podcast, we're going to be in full playoff mode. So week 9 will kind of seem like a distant memory at that point. So we're here to talk week 9. We're here to react. So let's get into some scores here. Mitch, run down the Western Big Six for us. We already mentioned Quincy gets the win, so I guess we'll start there and move along.
Yeah. So Quincy gets their first 9-0 season since 1935 with a 56-33 win over Mahomet Seymour. You had a shootout with UT and Galesburg. The Panthers get their 4th win of the year, 63-46 over Galesburg. And then things got a little crazy. You had Rock Island playing upset to Geneseo with a 15-12 win there. The Rocks finished with 3 wins in their last 4 weeks, and Geneseo does the exact opposite. And then the other one was Sterling upsetting Moline 22-17. So now both of those teams sit at 4-5. And again, likely their seasons are done, but it gets a little crazy this time of year. So you never know. But Moline was looking to secure that 5th win, and they might have been able to sneak into that top. I think they were projected maybe 31, but that was with a win. So we'll see what happens. But again, Sterling with a 22-17 victory over Moline.
Yeah, I think there's still an outside shot that Sterling or Moline could get in, but I say that very hesitantly because it's still a 4-5 record, and you got to get a lot of breaks. You got to get a lot of help. I don't think that both will get in. I think there's potential that maybe one or the other somehow. But Kyle, what say you here? 4-5 teams. We're looking at potentially two of them, maybe a few more, depending on how things shake out.
Yeah, I definitely think we're going to see at minimum 2, and looking at how some of the things are going, we might even see 3, maybe 4 now. I mean, I got to break it down further yet. But yeah, I'd say right now you're going to be definitely looking at a few more because I mean, just like we've discussed, a team like Stockton, who was projected to win and be 5-4, is now out at 4-5. So now they're going to go into the at-large pool, and there's a couple teams in here that we've talked about we're going to be in the running or in the mix of things for 5-4 teams to get in that either aren't going to be getting in now, and or they lost, and it's going to make that projection change to where more 4 and 5s are now going to get in.
Yeah. Quick kind of side note. What I love about this time of year and the IHSA football playoff brackets is that every game, biggest schools there are in the state to the smallest schools there are, every game matters to everyone, right? I mean, because like you said, the game in Stockton has trickle down effects that affect every other class. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I love about this, is that that's not an isolated game that only some 1A schools are concerned about. That result then kind of makes ripple effect all the way through the other 7 classes. And I that always fascinates me. I love that kind of the way things, are designed and set up in this playoff setup. Mitch, what do you got?
I was just going to say, running through some scores here, a team that is 4 and 5, and in our classes that we cover is Tuscola, who won 80-0 tonight.
Wow, geez.
over
Interesting.
winless Oblong, but still.
Yeah. Oblong, which we've discussed on the podcast before, oddly enough. So now we're moving along. We don't need to discuss more Oblong, but Quincy was actually, I was watching this one for a little while. It was close. They were only up 28-26, I believe, when I texted you, and they held Muhammad Seymour to a punt, and Aiden Byquist back to return the punt at about midfield, danced around a couple defenders, caught a block, and got to the outside edge, and he was gone. That was what kind of broke it open, and Muhammad Seymour never really got back into this one. So great job there by Aiden Byquist. Great effort all the way around from this Quincy Blue Devil team. Mitch, I was talking about it on the Tony Z and Friends podcast when I was, on with him. That posted this morning. If anyone wants to go check that out, I highly encourage you to do so. He does a great job covering. He does Fulton games, but covers the Northwest Upstate Illini. Brought me in to cover the Western Big Six in the track. And I mentioned on that podcast, Mitch, interesting talking point. Where do you put this Quincy team in terms of, power rankings of conference champions over the past, 5 to 10 years? Now, there's still a lot to be played out on the field, but this team has looked really good.
Like just in the Western Big Six?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of a team. Moline's had some good offenses. Rock Island had some good offenses. Sterling.
I look back at Moline had some really good defensive teams, right? They were putting up points, but they were really strong defensively for a couple of those years.
Yeah.
But Sterling was well-rounded. Yep.
Yeah, in the Matthew Bailey years, those teams were really good for Moline. But I can't really remember a team that is as dynamic and versatile as this Quincy team. They can beat you on the run, they can beat you in the pass, and they play really good defense. So, this is a really good team. We were wondering how they would stack up against Muhammad Seymour, just as a preview as they get into the really, really gauntlet of 7A playoffs. And they passed. So they have not looked frail in any game this season. We know that the Western Big Six had a pretty down year, all things considered, but they did what good teams do and just completely dominated the Western Big Six, and again, finishing the season undefeated.
Yeah, they've looked great. And I think that it is easy to point out, and I've read it, seen it on Twitter and on the social medias, that yes, maybe this Big Six as a whole is down a little bit, but don't take that away from Quincy, or don't put that as a knock on Quincy. This team is every bit as good as the conference champions we've seen over the last few years. And like you just pointed out, maybe on the top end, maybe the top of those teams. And I think regardless of what year, they've proven it. So quickly talk a little bit more about the Big Six here, and then we'll move along. Rock Island, Mitch, you pointed it out before we got on the pod here. They're 1 2-point conversion away in that Newman game to winning and having 4 wins this year. And I know it still probably wouldn't have gotten them to the playoffs, and they'd still be in the kind of the same situation they are now. But ultimately, that's salvaging a season from what looked really ugly in the beginning for this, start to the Coach Fritz era of Rock Island. They've rebounded and played really well here.
Yeah, it's almost like when they lost to Quincy, which was their third straight loss to start the season, and then they had the heartbreaker against Newman. Like it was almost like the tides were turning a little bit because they played Moline tough. That got them at least, or unfortunately, to win 5. But then they beat UT. They played Galesburg tough. They had that upset win against Sterling last week, and now they do it again against Geneseo. So, yeah, Coach Fritz, that's a heck of a way to finish your season and should give Rock Island fans some hope moving forward.
Yep. As you pointed out, United Township wins a wild one there, 63-46. That kind of gets back to the old Western Big 12 that we used to talk about, right?
Yeah, that's right. So shout out to Coach Welch. I mean, that's 4 wins on the year. 3 in a row to end the season. That includes a forfeit, but includes a win over Moline. So yeah, 4 wins for them and a great finish to the season for both UT and Rock Island.
Yep. Did we read through kind of the notes on the Sterling game?
No, we didn't. So this was back and forth for a while, but the play of the game also happened to be the game winner. Drew Nettleton tossed one up, and it looked like it was a little bit underthrown from the video that I saw, and his intended receiver Dylan Ottens just rips the ball out of the defender's hands and runs and finishes for a 62-yard score, and that put him up 22-17. So that was your deciding play, and then an Andre Claver pick with, I think it was a minute 15 or something left, really sealed the win here. So a classic Sterling and Moline game, really.
Yep. Good to see Andre Claver, senior kind of, leader on that team that had been injured all last year. Great to see him come up with that big interception there at the end to kind of seal the win for them. Even if they don't make the playoffs, that's a great way to end his, high school career there, sealing a victory at home for his team. So,
and still the reigning Sauk Valley Basketball Player of the Year. So he's still got that to look forward to here in a couple
I was going to say, he's got a lot still ahead of him here in his high school career. So, all right. Well, we started this conversation talking about one of our undefeated teams. Let's jump into one of our other undefeated teams, Lena Winslow, the Panthers. Surprise, surprise. They roll through the regular season here unbeaten. So, Kyle, what's that put the winning streak up to now?
28. What is that? 28, yeah.
28. And that is the NUIC record, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Well,
nobody
Mitch,
else has it.
Do we have run through the scores real quick, and then Kyle, let you kind of talk about anything that stood out to you or what you saw.
Yeah, so Lena Winslow gets the 36-8 win over Forreston. Galena comes back from behind to beat Stockton 27-24. Fulton was all over West Carroll 66-0. EPC closes out their season with a win 28-8 over Dakota. And the one that we had eyes on here, Althoff Catholic gets the 41-18 win over Dupec.
Kyle, what stands out to you? I'll let you have the floor first here.
The one that stands out the most to me, well, there's 2 of them really. One is we've been talking about it all year once we realized where Althoff Catholic would be, and then we saw where we had barometer games, and we were able to see those barometers between Lena Winslow and St. Teresa and Althoff and St. Teresa. And, at the time, while the scores kind of resembled the same, I would still say the favorite went to Lena Winslow. Well, tonight, going into the game, I thought that Dupec would be able to do a couple things with Althoff, and they kept it close there for a while. They returned the opening touch or kickoff for a touchdown. Got down 14-6, were able to make it 14-12, but then Althoff started to pull away. And similarly, Lena Winslow was able to get a large commanding lead over Dupec before Dupec ever started to really begin scoring against Lena Winslow. So I would say right now in that game, while I thought Dupec might have a little bit of a better shot, I knew that their gameplay would be a better matchup for Althoff. And either way, we got a good barometer of what that will be. And I think that's a good precursor of what we will potentially see in the 1A state championship game.
I was just going to, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No. So I was going to say that, yeah, I think that when you look at all these results, I think what stands out to me tonight is that Lena Winslow once again really separated themselves, right? It seems like they are once again, without a doubt, the best team in the Northwest Upstate Illini. They're the best team in Class 1A. They've been the team to beat all year, but I feel like now tonight, with them getting the win over Forreston convincingly, and then you see this final score between Althoff and Dupek and kind of seeing where these things fall, I think those are two teams to really watch for, the rest of the way. And especially on our side of the bracket, I think Lena Winslow has really separated themselves in Class 1A.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one that really sticks out to me is the Galena Stockton game. In the third quarter, I saw that Stockton gone up 24-12, so they're up 2 touchdowns. And I pretty much figured, Stockton had it in the bag. Things were going as planned. They were a 2-touchdown favorite coming into the game. They're up 2 touchdowns. I was like, cool, this one's over. I start driving home and I see an update that Galena had scored and cut that lead. All right, no big deal, right? Then I hear that they're down. I'm like, okay. Then I start tuning into that game a little bit closer. And I'm like, what just happened? And then that's when Stockton had the ball again with an opportunity to put a potential drive together. And then they throw an interception to give the ball right back to Galena. And then all they had to do was basically run a couple plays, get a first down, and then run out the clock. And the upset happened. And now Stockton's on a limb, hoping that they might be able to be one of the 4 and 5s to get in. Not sure if they're going to have enough playoff points right now. Looking at everything, they're about the 7th team out if they were to go to 4 and 5. So, they got to hope that 6 other teams get in, and then there's still a 7th spot open for them to sneak in there. So, bad loss, in my opinion, for Stockton, coming from a 2-touchdown favorite to losing by 3 points.
Yeah, that one kind of stood out to me for sure. Mitch, anything on your end, what you saw in the Northwest Upstate Illini tonight?
No, I think like we talked about, or like Kyle talked about earlier, we wanted to see what the measuring stick was and how Althoff was. And again, it almost seems like now that's maybe the likely state championship game in 1A.
Yeah.
If they're in the South and Lena gets through the North, those two will meet up. So I don't know who in the South would be able to beat them. I don't know how strong CPC is or anybody down there, but I just want to shout out Fulton here because they started 0-2 and finished 5-1. So, that they were going to the playoffs either way, but they get the automatic bid here, and they'll be a strong team in that 1A North bracket, no question about it.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I mean, after their win last week, I think that was a statement type of win. That's a marquee win for them to hang their hat on. And I mean, Kyle, you're familiar with it. I mean, this Fulton team, are they playing their best football right now heading into the playoffs? I think they seem like a team that, yes, their front end of their schedule was loaded, but I think that they've gotten better incrementally every week.
Oh, I would have to agree with that. I mean, they're a very young team. We've talked about that a lot. I'm pretty sure that they only start 3 seniors, and the rest of their starters are juniors and sophomores. So, from what we've seen early on, I mean, the only game I can really think that they would love to have back would be that game against Forreston back in week 1. I mean, when you take a look at that, that's really the only game I see on their schedule where it's like, yeah, they should have won that one. Maybe with playing Dupek, don't turn the ball over 5 times. And, that game could have lived up to the hype and billing we thought that it could have been rather than the lopsided score it ended up being. But they've definitely gotten better week to week to week. And, talking to Coach Pat Lohr, he was excited that this team was a 6-3 team. And, with that, he was already messaging me earlier tonight. Where's this team doing? What's that team doing? Kind of trying to see where he's going to land in the pairings, because he knows that if they get the right seed, they can make some noise again and definitely at least make another run at a third consecutive quarterfinal appearance.
Not the exact same scenario, but see Forreston a year ago, 5-4,
Right.
end up in the state semifinals. So, yep, absolutely. Before we wrap up the NUIC, where does the loss tonight? Where does that take Dupek here? It's a great team that they went up against in Althoff. We talked a lot about them throughout the season, but to go on the road in week 9, I guess not on the road, but in a neutral site in the middle of the state, this is a tough loss, right? Heading into the state playoffs.
Yes and no. I think that, while they, on paper, they were the supposed favorite according to ratings, I had them projected to lose this game based off of what I've seen, trying to compare Althoff to Lena Winslow. And I knew that if Althoff was close enough with Lena Winslow, that Dupek would not fare well in the game, which played out that way tonight. And with that, I don't think this ultimately affects Dupek playoff wise. Let's be honest. They're a strong team. They have a lot of skills, but we've said it all year. They need to improve their line play, and that's what really stuck out the most tonight. Wasn't the fact that they couldn't compete with Althoff, but up front they just got beat off the line on both sides of the ball, and that's what really wore them down. I know it's high school football and whatnot, but I feel that if Dupek just had a better overall line on both sides of the ball, we'd be talking about a team that could actually compete for a state championship. And that's really the missing piece that they have. They have a stud quarterback. They have the skills positions. They have a good running back in Connor Hughes. You have a lot of the key pieces that good quality teams need to have, but you don't have that consistent line play, and that's ultimately what hurts high school football.
Yeah. Well, I think, the perfect example that comes to my mind as soon as you give that description is Princeton, right? Over the years, Princeton has complemented some great skill positions with a pretty good line year in and year out. And, and they've produced in that 3A bracket. And Dupek's been right there, right in line with them. But yeah, I think that is a little bit of a separator. It'll be really interesting to see the matchups, the potential first round matchup, who they get matched up with, what their line play looks like, to see kind of if they can, to see where they stack up, I guess, in that playoff matchup with another team and their line. I think that's a big. That'll be interesting.
I think skill-wise, I think Dupek can compete with the correct draw. There was a couple different scenarios where if they had the right draw, they can definitely make a quarterfinal run based off of the opponents that they would play. Now, when they get matched up with a Byron in the second round, it's going to be ugly. We already know that. Byron is the legit team to beat in Class 1A. And then let's not be remiss about Montini Catholic popping in there at 5-4 either.
Yeah, that's the thing is I see Catholic swaps out of 3A and in steps Lombard Montini. So, yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
Looking at 3A, I think that's maybe where you might see a 4 and 5 team get in, maybe one. Just kind of looking at the playoff outlook, there was only 6 4 and 4 teams coming in, and you had Monmouth Roseville won, you had Oregon, they won, but you had Genoa Kingston lose, you had Beardstown lose. So those teams are going to be 4 and 5. I don't know about some of the Chicago teams or what Fairfield did, but I don't know. That one was going to be tight to see if a 4 and 5 team could get in there in the last spot.
Yeah, that's interesting to note. Yep. All right. Anything else in the Northwest Upstate Illini? All right. Nope. Moving along. Mitch, let's go to the Three Rivers. Give us all the scores. give us some of the info you got, and
Sure.
we'll go from there.
Yeah, no surprises here. The only one that we kind of had eyes on that might have had some playoff implications was Monmouth Roseville. They do get the win. They get to 5-4. They beat Sherrard 34-18. Princeton gets their 6th consecutive Three Rivers Mississippi crown with a 54-0 win over Hall. Rock Ridge on the other side, they get their 2nd consecutive Three Rivers Rock crown, 41-6 over Erie Prophetstown. We were talking about Rock Island earlier being a play away from 4 wins. I mean, Rock Ridge is a play away from being undefeated, going back all the way back up to week 1 against Newman. So a great season for them and coming off of that week 1 loss and really getting the train back on the tracks here. So Rock Ridge, again, your track rock champions. Kewanee blanked Aurora Central Catholic 50-0. Brady Clark, for all his accolades, this might be the most fun one. He breaks a 107-year-old Kewanee High School record that was set by someone named Nels Folgsang. I don't know. Sorry to the Folgsang family. 212 points was the record that stood for 107 years, but Brady Clark is now the Kewanee High School scoring leader. So congrats to him and the Boilermakers on a great year. Morrison finishes 8-1. They go 38-13 over BV. BV finishes at 4-5. Again, we'll see what happens in 1A, but I do not believe 4 and 5 gets into 1A. Newman puts up 50 over Mendota, 50-0. Evan Bushman had 3 touchdown passes. He had another one on the ground. Anna Jungerman, who we talked about, she kicked a 22-yard field goal to get on the board late. Talked about Monmouth Roseville, and then Orion finishes out their season with a 55-12 win over Riverdale.
Quickly getting back to Nels Folksang from the from the old classic Kewanee Boilermaker teams. I don't know if we have any highlights of him, but but what I will say is the record was broken. Brady Clark has scored on receiving, rushing, point after attempts, 2-point conversions, field goals, and interception returns. So that's so cool. Like Mitch, I love when we get a kid who has, thrown a touchdown pass, caught one and ran one, sometimes in the same game as the trifecta. I love when that happens. But hearing all of this that Brady Clark has done over his time is amazing. It's great.
Yeah, he's been fun to watch. So add him to the list of athletes that we've had the pleasure of covering over the past couple of years. Kewanee's playing really well. Obviously Aurora Central Catholic is not the bar going into the 4A playoff, but I've watched them the past couple of weeks. They're just clicking on offense and really looking forward to seeing how they stack up in 4A.
And you also pointed out in Newman's big win, 50-0 over Mendota, Anna Jungerman had the field goal. Dan Pearson from the local FCA over in the, on the Peoria kind of Illinois side, he did a story on her last week. Really cool. I think we retweeted it. I'm trying to remember now, but or reposted it. I should get the official terminology.
No, just retweet.
Anyway,
never repost, never X.
We shared the information, I believe. If we didn't, we will this week. Really cool story. Kyle, did you hear about this? The new kicker for Sterling Newman?
No.
So Anna Jungerman started the season as a Sterling Newman cheerleader, and a couple weeks into the season, they didn't have a kicker, and they approached her, talked about, she has a soccer background, has been a soccer player growing up, and Coach Mike LeMay, and I guess there'd been a lot of buzz about, like, could she do it? Would she do it? Whatever. So they brought her in, tried her out, and literally she went from kicking field goals in the Powder Puff football game at homecoming to the next week she was kicking in the game for Newman, hit 4 extra points to help them. I believe that was the win over Spring Valley Hall. So just an awesome story. The package, the Dan Pearson feature story that I was talking about. I mean, she just kind of talks about, like, it'd been something I'd thought about, but never really thought was serious. And then they asked me to do it. And my cheerleading team was supportive. The football team couldn't wait to have me join them. And so it's such a cool story. Like, I think she was the homecoming queen as well. So homecoming queen, cheerleader turned kicker for Sterling Newman. They're headed to the 1A playoffs. Really cool story all the way around. So
yeah, that's awesome. I mean, how can you beat that story?
I know
That's
it's incredible. Yeah. So
that's excellent for football, excellent for girls, excellent for soccer players transitioning into football. I mean, it's great all the way around.
yep. So looking through the results here, kind of a lot of what we expected. The Morrison Bureau Valley game was close early. Morrison pulls away in that one. So Bureau Valley ends the season with 4 wins. But overall, I think this is a great effort from a Coach Pistol team that was 1-8 a year ago. They're slowly building. I think come next year, when they're in the LLC, they'll be in that bigger division. They'll take Mercer County's spot there. I'm curious to watch this team and how they fit in, because they got a lot of talent returning. Elijah Endress, a kid we talked a lot about, he'll be back. Several other players as well. So that's a team to watch for sure. But Morrison gets the win here. They look really good heading into the 1A playoffs. Monmouth-Roseville gets the win. So they're one of those 4-4 teams that took care of business. So they should most likely be in now at 5-4. So credit to the Titans, because this was a scary Sherrard team that I think, it's a team that I could have seen playing spoiler, but Monmouth-Roseville gets the job done tonight.
Yeah, I think they'll get in because, again, they're in that 3A class, which gets a little crowded with 5 and 3 teams. But now that they're 5 and 4, I think they'll be safely in, because they have 40. Well, they beat Sherrard, who they were 3 and 6.
Yep.
So Monmouth Roseville ends up with 43 playoff wins. So that's a pretty strong candidate to get in. That's one of the most in 3A. Looking at that's not counting what happened this week, but
okay.
They'll be up there for sure, because going into this week, 40, which they had, was tied for the top in 3A. So yeah, they're in.
Okay. Anything else? Otherwise, we jump into the LLC.
I don't think so. Nope. That should do it.
All right. Well, give us the rundown on the LLC, and the only other undefeated team we haven't talked about yet, Stark County. Start there, I guess.
Yeah, so start on the small sides. Stark County finishes off the undefeated regular season, holding off a strong effort from United. This was close, but Stark County pulls away 28-20. That is their they finished the season now 9-0. They win the LLC small, and they will also be in that 1A North bracket. Also in the small side, Roval Williamsfield finishes their season at 7-2 with a 43-23 win over A-Town. Ann Weathersfield really surprising here. I thought Princeville would put up more of a fight, but 49-6, Ann Weathersfield got the win there. So great win for Ann Weathersfield. Rushville Industry won 40-34 over South Fulton. Go back to the large school. The title was decided between 2 unbeaten in conference play teams. Farmington gets the win 27-19 over Knoxville. Farmington was up 15-0 early, and they kind of held on late. So the LLC large school crown goes to the Farmers. Macomb, they get the win to close out their season, 44-8 over Havana. Heartbreaker for Illini West. They're trying to get their 5th win and become playoff eligible. Central A&M, they come back and they score in the final seconds to win that game 29-26. Merco wins 44-32 over West Hancock, and Elmwood Brimfield wins 69-16 over LVC.
I think Knoxville scored first in that one. I think it was.
Do I have that wrong? Okay.
I think it was back and forth early. That was one of the games I was watching, trying to keep up with, doing the Mitch Stormer job. That was when I was trying to, keep up with everything, and not doing well, mind you, right. But trying my best. But
nobody beats Mitch.
Yeah,
you tried. You tried. That's for sure.
Yeah. And Mitch, how about, you're trying to send out tweets, trying to send out the X, and you're getting blocked, getting deleted tweets, and come on, Mitch, what are you doing?
No, they ended up showing up. I don't know what happened, but they ended up appearing out of nowhere. But yeah, and you are right. That game was 7-6 early. I don't know where I saw 15-0, but yeah, that's on me. But
I was accused of deleting Mitch's tweets here. I'm not censoring anyone. So
I don't know what you do when you're in there. So yeah, they came back. They arrived.
All right.
Elon figured out they were good tweets and decided to put them back up.
Okay. So Farmington, they win the large school side of things here. They'll end up in the 2A. They're right. There'll be a 2A playoff team. And, a nice win here for over Knoxville. Man, tough way to end the season for Knoxville. Rolling along. And then, man, 2 weeks in a row, they, take 2 losses heading into the postseason. We'll see where they end up in the bracket play. But, they're a strong team. We talked about them all year long. 2 tough losses against 2 really quality opponents. One potentially in Farmington that they could see again because they'll both be up in that 2A North bracket. So it'd be interesting to see how all that shakes out. Mercer County, a 2A team on that north side of the bracket. They beat West Hancock. They'll be in there as well. They're a playoff team. And then on the opposite side of things, go ahead.
One result in 2A, Arthur Lovington beat Sullivan Oakwood Valley. They were both 8-0 teams heading in, and Arthur Lovington won 42-13. So a bit of a shakeup there at the top of 2A.
Okay. Looking down on the small school side of things, Stark County ends their year undefeated 9-0. Not ends their season, ends their regular season, I should say, at 9-0. Great season for the Rebels. Mitch, we've joked all year long that, early on we were high on Anawan-Weathersfield and Rova Williamsfield, and we thought Stark County would be a playoff team, but I don't think, we certainly didn't say they'd go 9-0. So credit to the Rebels. They showed up and got the job done week in and week out here. See where they sit in that playoff field, in that 1A playoff field. I mean, that 1A playoff field ends up becoming, the View from the West Invitational because it's all of our teams.
It's all teams that we cover, that Kyle covers. It's going to be familiar territory for sure.
Yep, absolutely. And don't sleep on Rova Williamsfield and A&W because they both have played really well outside of those couple losses. Anawan-Weathersfield is the team that they fell 1 point short against Stark County at home in week 2. And now they've really rolled along. So I think, they seem to be firing on all cylinders here, certainly with the convincing win tonight over Princeville. That's a team to keep an eye on for sure. Anything else from the LLC? Otherwise, Kyle, we'll let you take over and talk about 8-man. And that was where you were. He's stretching. He's getting loose. He's ready to talk about it. Start with where you were at, and we'll go through the 8-man scores here. Mitch, do you want to go through the 8-man scores?
Yeah, I'll just scores first. Over? Yeah, I'll just scores first. This is just what I have and what I found on ihsafootball.com. Amboy wins 52-6 over Polo in the big game of the night. Ridgewood beat up on Galva 50-14. Milledgeville did the same to Bushnell Prairie City 72-12. Cornell Woodland gets the win over Blue Ridge 49-6. Bit of an upset here. Peoria Heights beats Hiawatha 40-24, and South Beloit beats Christian Life 25-24.
Wow, that really changes things just a tad there.
See, this is what it's all about, Kyle. Putting you to work.
Hiawatha lost to Peoria Heights.
Yes.
Wow. Well, it looks like we're gonna have 2, 4, and 5 teams in the playoffs then. And that helps Orangeville's seeding just a little bit.
And Orangeville gets the forfeit because they were playing Quest. Is that right?
Yep.
And so their record is what?
5-4. They are 5-4.
Of course, you got the big one tomorrow in Martinsville and St. Thomas More too. Looking elsewhere, I don't think. Yeah, St. Anne, they won, but they're not getting in anyway.
Nope.
I don't know what happened in the West Prairie West Central game. Not quite.
36-22.
Okay. Yeah, you got River Ridge tomorrow playing Alden Hebron. They could get in if they win. Orangeville got the win. So
River Ridge will be in regardless because they have more playoff points than Orangeville, Hiawatha, and Bushnell. Well, they have more points than Hiawatha and Bushnell.
Okay.
Well, I
And
think
then
if Alden Houston does win, they will get in as well because they would automatically go over top of River Ridge.
okay. And then you got South Fork. They'll get the win tomorrow, I'm sure, over Unity Christian. They're at South Fork the 6-2. And Pawnee sitting at 4-4. They play Metro East Lutheran tomorrow.
So
Which Pawnee should get that win too.
So Kyle, what were you surprised by the Amboy Polo result tonight?
Yes and no. I had caught wind that Polo was going to be without Carter Murdian due to some ineligibility issues. And so not having him in the game was going to allow Polo to utilize Brock Soto pretty much as a wildcat quarterback. And taking a look at Amboy, granted, I know that we watched them quite a bit last year, but tonight was the first night all season I've had an opportunity to watch Amboy. And I think part of that's because some of the games I had chances to go see them, they weren't going to be good games to begin with. And knowing what Amboy had and what they could do, it wasn't worth my time. But I tell you what, seeing Amboy tonight, man, they got bigger since last year. I mean, and they look every part of the number one ranked team that we had. Now, I know that STM has been talked about on your podcast, my podcast, across social media and whatnot all season long. And of course, we've heard some of their fans whining about where they're ranked and whatnot. But at the same time, taking a look at how Amboy was tonight with Polo, I would definitely say that Polo's just not to the level that we thought they were at. They do have one of the best players in the entire 8-man game in Brock Soto, but they're just undersized compared to some of these teams. That's how Milledgeville is able to control them. Tonight, Amboy was able to control them. And if you really go back and look at that Milledgeville Polo game to what tonight's Amboy Polo game was, Amboy took over pretty much in the same facet that Milledgeville had done against Polo, where they got out there, they scored right away. They were able to get a fumble that Brennan Blaine was able to return for a touchdown. I mean, before you knew it, what looked to be the start of a close game throughout the first half, 8 minutes of the first quarter, all of a sudden, within 1 minute, Amboy put up 2 touchdowns. And it was 14-0 like that. Polo was able to get their 1 touchdown on the board on their next drive to make it 14-6. But after that, it was just Amboy. And all of I mean, you could just watch the line of scrimmage and see the size difference, the physicality difference just take over in that game. So, the way I would look at it right now, I definitely feel that Amboy deserves the number 1 seed. They're definitely the team to beat, in my opinion. I think that Milledgeville is 2, and STM would be number 3 as far as rankings would go and how I see it. I know STM has some skills with Peace Boomba. The kid's dynamite. He's getting some looks from some D1 schools. It helps that he's sitting right there in Champaign as well. So, having Illinois looking at you when you're right next door is never a bad thing. And I mean, he's got the physical qualities. He's like 6'2" and 210, 215 pounds as well. So, he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the look. But one of the things I've noticed too, STM is a pretty big team. That I think size-wise they match up with Amboy. But with that, I don't think that they are a very physical team. If they were more physical, I would have expected more separation in that game against South Beloit a couple weeks ago than what there was. And of course, there were some people talking about, South Beloit potentially going 8-1, and here I I'm the dummy going through all the projections. I'm like, no, South Beloit 6-3. Nah, South Beloit 6-3. And here we are, South Beloit 6-3. So I don't know. There just wasn't something there that was clicking for me that other people thought, well, South Beloit's this, that, and whatever else they thought they were. But I'm like, they're not going 8-1. I don't know what to tell you guys, but here we are. They're 6-3, and St. Thomas More is right there with a shot at 9-0. I think that they enter that game definitely as the favorites, but be interesting to see how Martinsville plays that game. Their quarterback is his last name's Herrera. I can't remember his first name, but he's been having a heck of a season. He's been doing some things for Martinsville, albeit they got routed by Amboy. So this will give us a good barometer of where St. Thomas More is, depending on how Martinsville plays with them. So definitely a great game to keep an eye on tomorrow. And thank God they moved it up from a 7:00 start to a 1:00 kick, so we can get this in ahead of the playoff pairings.
They were going to kick off at 7:00 on a Saturday night in week 9.
Yes. Yeah, that's what Martinsville did last year too. Remember, we were going through the playoff show and they were still playing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. Good. Yep. Good call. Good recall on that. So, okay, well, let's play some hypotheticals here in the 8-man world. If St. Thomas More wins and they're undefeated, are they the 1 seed and Amboy's 2, or vice versa? Okay, yes.
St. Thomas More will be the 1 seed with a win. Amboy at the 2 seed.
Okay. And now if Martinsville wins.
If Martinsville wins, Amboy will jump to the 1 seed.
Yep.
Martinsville will go from the 4 seed to the 2 seed, which will drop St. Thomas More into the 3 seed and knock Milledgeville down to the 4 seed.
Okay. Interesting.
Well, you got to remember, it doesn't go off playoff points in 8-man. It goes off wins head-to-head first. So Martinsville, if they were to beat St. Thomas More, will automatically jump to that 2 seed by beating St. Thomas More.
Okay. Yep. All right. So just overall, I guess, do we want to start with 8-man and then work our way up 1A, 2A, 3A through the brackets here? Do we want to do some bracket talk? I know we don't have any updated projections quite yet, but just in general, looking at the field or just kind of talking about what we see.
Yeah, we can definitely make some noise.
What are your thoughts, Kyle? I know you were high on Ridgewood. You liked what you saw in them early in the year. We'll get into the 8-man talk here in the bracket. Where will they fit in? And they played well against Polo. They played well against Amboy. Is there a potential, on any given, Saturday that they could come up with one of those surprise wins in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think so, because here's the thing with Ridgewood. At 7-2, and those 2 losses being to number 1 and number 2, right? No,
yeah.
Number 1 and number 3, but
yeah.
Polo's gonna drop. I know Polo will drop. If we don't drop Polo, then we're dummies. But the loss to Polo was one of those games that Ridgewood's probably looking at saying, "Man, wish we could have that game back." Right? I mean, they had chances to put that game away, and quite frankly, they should have put them away. And I think that's where, taking a look at those comparisons, I felt like we might be able to have somewhat of a game with Amboy tonight, but on the outside of it, I just had a feeling it would be a runaway, which it turned out to be as the game went on. But I feel that Amboy did not play a very good game with Ridgewood. They were never in jeopardy of losing that game, but it wasn't a clean game for them. And, being that Ridgewood 7-2, unfortunately, their playoff points just aren't there, and they're going to be the 9 seed from what I can see. I got to go back through and break this all out again, especially after hearing that Hiawatha loss. Thanks, Mitch. But being the 9 seed, that means that if St. Thomas More does win tomorrow, you're going to have to play a tough 8 seed in South Fork, who also has to play tomorrow. And South Fork should win that game that they have. And in my projections, and granted, like I said, I got to go back through and relook at it, but in my projections, I have them at the 8 seed. So they would have to go on the road to South Fork and play them. And then that if they win that, which I feel that they should, because I do think that they're a stronger team than South Fork, then you gotta then you get a host St. Thomas More at home, because St. Thomas More will be the 1 seed and they get to play at home against Bushnell Prairie City. St. Thomas More should win that one handily, and then they get to go on the road to the Bowl in Cambridge and play Ridgewood on their home turf.
Yeah.
I think that you could see a potential upset.
Wow, that's okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
I think that would be a great quarterfinal matchup. I really do.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, for sure. All right.
And,
Well,
and with that, that would shake up a lot, because in all honesty, the only thing that I see standing in the way if projections hold firm, the only thing that I see standing in the way of St. Thomas More making it to Monmouth is having Ridgewood there. Because if everything holds true as it is, the next 3 teams you're going to have are Milledgeville, Amboy, and Polo are all going to be in the same bracket. And the only other thing you're relying on is either Milford, Cisna Park, and Martinsville to meet up and have a chance at knocking off St. Thomas More or Ridgewood as well.
so that's fascinating, is that at some point, if Ridgewood's on that bracket, on their own up top with St. Thomas More, but you have Polo, Milledgeville, Amboy all down in another half of the bracket because of the way the seedings shake out. Yeah, you're right. And some of the teams that we think are the best in the state, the way it splits out, maybe that helps Ridgewood, but they'd have to get the win. They'd have to take care of it. They have to get the job done. But it is interesting to see how that could potentially shake out. That's I love the 8-man bracket. We've talked about it the last couple of years. It's a ton of fun. So
it's awesome. I mean, and it's so funny because I get so many people that ask me, and they're like, well, when you have like 5, 7, and 2 teams, you just go off playoff points, right? Because everybody's a tie. I'm like, no, you still have to figure out who beat who first.
yeah.
So there's still that emphasis on wins matter, especially in head to head, because that's ultimately going to propel you to a higher seed. For instance, Martinsville is projected to finish with less playoff points than Milford, but because they beat Milford, they're going to be seated above Milford. So that's what people forget to realize. And then after that, then it falls back into suit of playoff points. So, I mean, so MCP beat Flanagan Cornell Woodland. So they're going to be above them. But Polo falls in between there because Polo's going to have the playoff points potentially to be either above FCW. There could be a tie there. I mean, I had it projected as a tie, and I put Polo in front because of the tiebreaker is supposed to be a coin flip according to the I8FA bylaws. If you don't have head to head and playoff points don't break it. But with that, the
I threw you off there.
Yeah, you did. With that, I went through it by points allowed. So Polo had the fewest points allowed. And talking to a coach earlier tonight from South Fork, I said, that's what should be the 4th tiebreaker. Why go to a coin flip? Why not just go to points allowed? Because then that puts more emphasis on your defense needing to play better as well. So if you want to put an emphasis on wins, put an emphasis on your defense playing good too.
I think any way that you can avoid having a coin flip decide something, yeah, absolutely. Like draw some numbers that can decide it on the field. Yeah, for sure. All right. Tomorrow night, Kyle, we'll be breaking down that 8-man bracket top to bottom. And Joe Meridian will be there. He's kind of the 8-man expert, right? He'll be there to fill us in with everything we need to know. And anyone who's listening needs to know.
He's about the closest thing we're going to have to a guru on 8-man, being that he has covered all of the polo games this year. So he's been able to see a lot of teams play. And then on top of that, doing the 8-man podcast as well, which I'm glad that those guys have started up. But it's definitely very insightful for sure.
Yeah, is it like Spotlight on 8-man or something? I don't know what it's called, but I've seen it on Facebook. It's good. It's great information.
Yeah, Spotlight on Illinois 8-man football.
Yeah, so anyone listening to this, go check them out. They have great information on the 8-man football from around the state, and a lot of guys who are like I said, around the state taking in a lot of 8-man football, so they have a lot of information there. All right, do we move into Class 1A and keep going up the ranks here and just kind of talking about teams and the potential brackets? I know we don't know, how things will shake out exactly. This is still the preview to the playoff preview. So, we're getting there. But Class 1A, Lena Winslow is going to be the 1 seed on the north side of the bracket, correct?
Yeah, yes. They are going to be the 1 seed for sure. Being that they're 9-0, looking at things as they lay out, we're only looking at 5 teams to be 9-0, and 2 of them are going to be in the north with Stark County and Lena Winslow, which Lena Winslow has the edge on the playoff points for that number 1 seed.
Yeah. Mitch, did you see the potential first round matchup in Class 1A?
Which one?
I'm talking about your Morrison Mustangs potentially hosting the Fulton Steamers.
Ooh, what a great one that would be.
Man, can you imagine that? Like, now that wouldn't count for the wooden shoe, right? Not technically, because that's a playoff game.
I don't know that there's stipulations for it. I don't think that there is. Honestly.
I guess that's, I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be quite the buzz there. If that were to come to fruition. So that would be quite a few. I've seen quite a few people in that stadium before, but that would definitely bring it out.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be an amazing atmosphere. Another interesting matchup here. Kyle, I don't know what your projections say, but the Sioux says of this morning, I should clarify to people listening, as of Friday morning, said that Forreston Sterling Newman as an 8-9 matchup. That's an interesting matchup.
Sorry, I had to find my mute button.
Yes.
Yes. There is the potential at that. I know initially I had Forreston at 7, Newman at 8, but there's still, how things are getting moved around. There's definitely that opportunity for that 8-9 matchup to happen and see Forreston and Newman together. I'd be very intrigued in that matchup for sure.
Yeah. Well, on the southern half, Camp Point Central probably going to be the number 1 seed down there again. And then Yep. And then potentially Althoff, who we've talked a lot about. They got the win tonight over Dupec. Potentially the 4 seed. So you'd see a matchup, if depending on how things shake out, you'd see a quarterfinal matchup between Althoff and Camp Point Central.
Yeah, I think Althoff's definitely locked into that 4 seed, considering that the top 3 were all 9-0 and nobody was catching Althoff on playoff points.
Yep. Well, anything else in Class 1A? Any teams that you're looking at, Mitch or Kyle?
There's 1A South is going to run through Althoff Catholic. I think I think Valliere at 9-0, while it's a great season for them and they did upset Johnston City, I don't think they're a true player or contender for anything further. I think your top two teams outside of Althoff are actually going to be CPC and Greenfield Northwestern.
Okay.
And they come out of the same conference but separate divisions, so they haven't been able to play each other yet. Some common opponents would be Hardin Calhoun, which enters with a 6-3 record, and Calhoun played both those teams very close and tight. So I think one of your sleeper picks in the South bracket might be a 6-3 Calhoun team making a potential run.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
And I know that. Nope, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I know that people are still pretty high on Casey Westfield at 8-1. That only loss coming to Mount Carmel. I'm having a hard time putting a barometer on that though, because they play in the Little Illini Conference, and outside of Mount Carmel and Casey Westfield being the two top teams that typically come out of that conference, the rest of that conference is relatively garbage. So
relatively garbage.
There's not a lot of competition level down there, and so it's hard to gauge how these two teams really are. But when those two played each other, I think the final score was like 27-24. So, maybe Casey Westfield could make some noise as an 8-1. We'll see.
Yeah, the one other thing that we should mention here is that, in a lot of these projections over the last couple of weeks, Stockton has been in that 1A North field. So you're likely not going to see them in that 1A North field because they fell short and they're 4-5. So, what does that do to the field there? That shakes things up a little bit. That's going to move some seeds around a little bit on that north side.
Oh, for sure. You're definitely going to see some things. I think my initial thought was that we'd have the line at 299 with Stockton falling out. I'd have to take a look and see who else is in. I know I had DMAC in, so that's where that 299 came in at. And if that's the case, then we might be looking at like Arthur Lovington coming in. So somebody from the South will be bumping back up to the North, which will probably be GCMS.
Yeah, I think Seuss had GCMS up on the northern half, actually playing Marquette, I think, at one point. And then some things shuffled around, and I saw some different things. But, yeah, that's interesting to follow. Looking at 2A, Maroa Forsyth should be the 1 seed on that northern half. But then you're looking at Rock Ridge will be in the mix, Knoxville from our area, Farmington. The team that we talked about on the podcast last week, Bloomington Central Catholic, seems like a team to watch in that northern half of the 2A bracket. Mitch, what do you got?
I was just going to say they only won by a score tonight against a 5-3 team. So I think we've talked about that. We don't know how good Bloomington Catholic is, but I just happened to see that score. They won 22-15. So again, they're undefeated, but we'll see what the quality of opponents that they've played looks like.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like they were pretty battle tested a year ago. I haven't looked at exactly what they played this year to, give the, total number or, to kind of give the full picture. But I was seeing, as of these projections, potential 8-9 Rock Ridge versus Knoxville. That's an interesting local first round matchup for us. Farmington would be a 5 seed against potentially El Paso Gridley as a 12. Looking at the southern half, Shelbyville may be the number 1 seed, but Athens is there as a 5. They're a team to kind of keep your eye on at all times. So you said that Arthur Lovington, they got a win tonight, Mitch?
Yes.
Okay, they were projected as a 2 seed, so I don't know if that affects them, if they were projected to get the win tonight or not. I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago, looking at that southern bracket, I had Breeze Mater Day. I ranked them up high week in and week out, and they kind of burned me and never really turned in anything. It's a team I'm kind of keeping my eye on again this year down in that 2A bracket. But, ultimately, I think that, I don't know. I think the North is going to take a title here somewhere. And I think Maroa Forsyth is the favorite going in. I know it's easy to say that because they're the 1 seed. But right, Kyle, from what you're seeing in Class 2A, Maroa Forsyth has to be a favorite.
They're definitely my favorite. I mean, they return a lot of talent from last year. Caden Maurer runs that offense. They got Andy Munjoy back. I feel that Maroa Forsyth's definitely the team to beat. And based off of what we've seen all year, there's nothing that says to tell me otherwise outside of, they had the close come from behind win over Williamsville. But tonight's game with Athens they gave Athens a pounding. So I don't see a whole lot of teams in here that are truly at the potential to knock them off. I would have to agree that possibly Seneca and Bloomington Central Catholic are going to be their primary teams to watch for.
Seneca put up like 70 some points tonight on St. Bede. So
and see, I'm not sold on Seneca. I know that they have a great quarterback, runs a power offense.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I'm not sold on them either. And 2 of their wins, I mean, not through any fault of their own, 2 of their victories are forfeit wins. So there's almost kind of a small sample size when you're looking around, at their undefeated record. So no, I think they still got to prove something to me for sure. Do you want to jump into 3A here? And you look at the 3A North, Byron's the 1 seed. Kyle, do you get the sense, is the Big Northern as good as they have been in years past?
I think that Byron is as good as they have been in years past. I know that they're much improved over what they were last year, and they returned a lot of people from last year. But at the same token, I think other teams within the Big Northern are not at the same level that we've seen. Stillman Valley's been tough in recent years. They kind of dropped down. Dixon was supposed to give Byron a game that didn't even come close to that. Byron tore them apart. Genoa Kingston's been a relatively decent team in years past, and now they're not even in the playoffs. We watched what Rockford Lutheran happened when they made the 1A playoffs last year, and I see a similar demise for them this year. So, yeah, I don't think the Big Northern is as strong as what we've seen, but there's a lot of conferences that I feel are in that same category. So, that's what makes these playoffs so interesting is, yeah, we look at just a year ago, but there's a lot of things that have changed since last year. And some teams have grown, but they're just not growing to the same level to replace some of the better teams that we lost all at the same time. And that's why I think, right now, when you break down 1A, 2A, and 3A, I would tell you 3A is the strongest field. 1A would, as an overall, would be the second strongest field, at least through the top 10. And then 2A would be the weakest of the 3. And that's just coming from games that we've seen happen with, like Fulton beating Knoxville. We've seen Maroa Forsyth beat Williamsville. We watched Athens barely lose to Williamsville. And a couple of Lena Winslow beat Dupec. We've seen some of these games already take place. And granted, it's based off a rating system, and it's hard to tell things off through ratings themselves because all it is raw data put into an algorithm, right? But I think it gives us a good look at how each team should be in comparison to each other. But when you get into the playoffs, you start to see that really break open even more because now you get those teams that were in close conferences start to have opponents that are common with other teams to give us a greater picture of what we should expect to happen. And one of those situations took place tonight with Althoff beating Dupec. I mean, if you take a look at ratings, Dupec was rated higher. They were the favorite by 11 points. And clearly that game went 41-18 in favor of Althoff. And if you told me to line up the two teams based off of what we knew, like I said, I felt Dupec could be a team that could play with them, but ultimately I would have told you I would have taken Althoff, and even in my show this week, I picked Althoff to beat Dupec.
Yeah. Mitch, when you look around this 3A bracket, where we've talked a lot about Princeton. Obviously, they're a one-loss team, and it was a last-second loss. They were darn near an undefeated season again. Where do they fit in this 3A bracket, in this 3A field? Because like we talked about, the Big Northern, maybe not what they were the last few years. IC Catholics not in the mix anymore. That being said, Montini's in there. I guess I'll get to the point. Where do you feel like Princeton fits in here?
I think they've got as good of a shot to get as far as they've been right this year. I don't know if this 3A class isn't as strong as it's been in years past, or if it's just more evened out. Obviously, having Lombard Martini in there throws a wrench into things quite a bit. And I'm going to mispronounce this. So I always mispronounce this. Is it DeCoin?
You got it. You got it.
All right. They beat Murfreesboro pretty good tonight. Murfreesboro's 4A, so I think we heard some Twitter chatter this week that they're pretty good. That DeCoin looks good. So, but yeah, going back to Princeton, they're playing really well. They've had no blemishes other than a last-second field goal against Morrison. So they're playing as good as they have in years past going into the same time of year. Don't have the Tegan Davises anymore, and that maybe that one dynamic player, but they've got a handful of guys that have been around for a long time, a lot of winning football. They've been in this position before, and they're as primed as ever to make yet another run here in 3A.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, I'll ask you the same thing. Where does Dupec fit into this 3A field? Is there, depending on matchups, we talked a lot early in the podcast about line play and how important that is for Dupec to have success. Where does this Dupec team fit in here?
I would say that Dupec's definitely I feel that they're a top 10 team when I take a look at different things. Now, going back to DeCoin beating Murfreesboro, huge game for DeCoin because Murfreesboro was the favorite in that game. But I also take a look at their conference, and I mean, Murfreesboro was in the state championship here just a couple years ago in 4A against Richmond Burton, and they were laughed off the field in the first half of that game. I mean, Carrie was begging me to go home and at halftime, and I was like, "No, I want to stay. I gotta watch this game." And yeah, it was like 50-12 or whatever it was. I mean, it was a joke, right? But we have not seen anything out of DuQuoin in recent years. Yes, they have a legendary program, great program, history, especially coming out of Southern Illinois, but we haven't seen them do much in recent years either. And I've seen the Twitter chatter that Mitch is talking about, but at the same time, I've heard other people say DuQuoin's not as good as their record. So I mean, here it is again. It's one of those things where you got to take it for what it is. And when I take a look at the rating system, I feel that DuQuoin is a lower rated team than what their record says they are as well. I don't think that they're a top 5-6 team. Do I think they had a great season? Absolutely. Can they make a run in the 3A South playoffs? Yes, because I think 3A North is definitely going to be much tougher. I feel that one of the teams that's getting overlooked in 3A is Roxana. I think that's a team to watch in 3A South that we could potentially see playing in Bloomington the Friday after Thanksgiving.
I saw or heard you mention them. What do you like about them? What do you see? Because that's a name that, as the year kept going, I was kind of putting them in my rankings, but I didn't know where to slot them because I don't know much about Roxana. They're not a program we're talking about year in and year out.
They are a power run team, and me and power run teams. I always favor those, especially when we get into the colder months, because
hey, Mitch never wants to throw a pass ever. It doesn't matter how warm it is. So
no, I mean I've already had that conversation tonight with somebody about Lena Winslow only throwing one pass all year. I'm like, yeah, they've only thrown one pass. They completed that pass, but why do they need to pass? they've been able to run the ball against everybody that they played. So tell me, why do you need to pass?
I have no answer.
Exactly, you don't, because there isn't one. I mean, three things can happen when you pass the ball, and two of them are bad, right?
Yeah, that's
So
classic. Yep.
So why do it? I mean, especially when you get up against. I mean, we saw it in the first half tonight. I mean, why was the Lena Winslow Forston game closer than what everybody anticipated it being? And then it broke open in the second half. I'll tell you why, because I found out that Forston was able to control the second quarter of the game with what we all thought that they would, ball control. And when you are able to control the ball and slow the game down, you find yourself able to play with superior opponents. And at the same time, you're just going to suffocate the inferior opponents. And ultimately, that's what Lena Winslow did. While Forston was able to slow down the machine of Lena Winslow, in the second half, Lena Winslow was able to suffocate Forston and make it the lopsided score it ended up being.
So,
And I think that's where we're going to see Roxana do. They have a very good quarterback. They have a very good fullback, and they have some good team speed. And granted, I haven't seen them play, so I'm just getting this secondhand from people I know down in that area. And they're very impressed with what Roxana is. And then again, when I look at the rating system, they pop up at number 3 on the rating system. So, and
Mitch, your cat always comes out, to hang out in the instant reacts.
I'm trying to keep her quiet.
But that in all honesty, that's why I like Roxana. And just looking at the overall field 3A South, I feel that they're going to be a player.
Yeah. Getting back to, teams that we're covering, our area, potentially Monmouth Roseville has a 10-7 matchup against Noble Johnson. So I believe that's a school out of Chicago area. I gotta like that draw. If you're, Monmouth Roseville in the first round, if they get it, they would potentially play Wilmington, who's the 2 seed, or a 15 seed Prairie Central in the second round. So depending on how it shakes out, that's not a bad opening draw or not a bad kind of bracket for Monmouth Roseville coming in at a 5-4 team. And I think a team that's still fairly young. So I think they have a lot of talent coming back next year as well to potentially build on. But I guess the last thing before we, move on, or before we kind of wrap up tonight, we talked about IC Catholic being out of 3A. And we obviously know that Montini is a, potential state power. Are they a threat to win a 3A state title? Are they that good?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you take a look at some of their games, and I'm gonna refer back to the rating system. So when I look at the rating system, number one's Byron, where they've been ranked all year anyway on everybody's state rankings. Byron's number 1 in it. And you take a look at who's number 2 in Montini Catholic, despite the fact that they've lost 3 straight. And Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they lost to St. Lawrence tonight.
I think they won.
Did they? If they did, that's even more impressive because St. Lawrence was projected to win that game.
And they won 24-17.
Okay, so that just boosted Montini's chances even better because I had them going in at 5-4, and here they are going in at 6-3. So you take a look at their losses. They lost to Providence Catholic, who we said won tonight, and they're going to be in the 5A playoffs.
And they were a recent state champion, right? A few years ago.
I can't remember if they won, but they were in the state championship game in 21. So 2 years ago. They lost to St.
Did they lose to Joliet Catholic that year?
Yes.
Or last year?
Yeah. Yes. So they were runner up. Good call, Mitch. They lost to St. Viator, which that was only by a touchdown, and I felt that was a game Montini should have won. I even had projected them to win that one, but then they only lost.
And Viator won tonight, so they're 5-4. They're in.
And then they lost to Brother Rice. And Brother Rice is an 8A school that you get them against some of the public schools up in 8A, you're going to pick Brother Rice to win those games.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think Montini is definitely a very formidable opponent. I mean, they beat Nazareth Academy. Nazareth was your 5A state champ just a year ago. And I don't know if they won tonight. If they didn't, they would be 4-5, and Nazareth would be one of the top teams to get in at 4-5 if we do in fact go to 4-5 at-large bids, which I feel is a high possibility we see.
Nazareth lost to St. Francis, who's a good 5A school.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, because they had lost 4 straight to start the season, right? And then they racked off 4 wins, and then so they ended up.
Yeah. 5. Nazareth had a loaded schedule.
Yeah.
They had a loaded schedule.
Yeah. Well, I think
you take a look at those losses. I mean, they lost to IC Catholic by 2. They lost to Kankakee by 7. They lost to Montini by 1.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll maybe wrap up the bracket talk there. Wrap it up at 3A. But if you didn't hear your school, we didn't talk enough about your school tonight, we certainly will talk about them tomorrow on the live NUIC playoff preview show live on YouTube. Just head to YouTube, search NUIC football. We'll be live as the brackets are released. We'll be breaking it all down, talking about the local teams that we cover, certainly talking about the NUIC, but teams in our area and also teams around the state. We got we got some feelers out to everybody around the area that we know, around the state, to give us information. We'll get that information out there. And then, Mitch, you and I will jump in and get our regular podcast on Tuesday morning that'll come out, and we'll go through everything. Every school that we have that's in the playoffs, we'll talk about it. And, we usually get a little crazy and dive into the other brackets that even if we don't know a whole lot about it, we're willing to talk. So we'll talk.
Yeah. Can I just say some preview watching before the playoffs tomorrow? You've got number 1 in 8A Loyola going up against number 1 in 7A Mount Carmel. So
on Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon action there.
It's Saturday at 1, and I think they did that last year too. So if you can find that, I don't know where it'll stream, if it's on NFHS or where, but a little pregame action if you can't wait for the pairings to come out, because that'll be a really, really fun game of 2 just titans of Illinois football.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. All right, boys. I think we're gonna wrap up the instant reacts tonight. And Kyle, in a matter of hours, I'm headed your way, man.
All right, I can't wait. I'm excited. I actually ran into Joe tonight too down in Amboy, because he was covering the game on the Polo radio broadcast, and got to sit in on the halftime show with Josh Dillon on the Amboy side of the radio broadcast. So it was very exciting. A lot of playoff talk already, and for good reason. We're finally here. This, like you say, this is the best 5 weeks of the year, and it gets started tonight. Even though we don't have any games, it gets started tonight with shuffling around everything on what just happened here in week 9. So always a fun time of the year for sure.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you to everyone who listens. Keep listening. We'll be talking all kinds of playoff stuff in the next couple days. Check out NUICfootball.com. Check them out on YouTube. And, we'll be live there. But, Kyle, you're pumping out great content every week and giving your thoughts and projections and predictions, as the playoffs move along. So, man, I can't wait. It's going to be great. Can't wait to see the brackets. Can't wait to talk about it. And, we'll talk to everybody next week. Mitch, we'll be back and we'll be, breaking it all down. Maybe, Mitch, what do you think tomorrow night if we do another reacts to the pairings? Because you won't be able to be in person with Kyle and myself. So
right. Yeah, it'll probably take a couple shows to really dig into it and look at it. So yeah, I'm all for that.
All right. Well, maybe that's a tease. Maybe there's a bonus episode coming here in the middle, but we'll definitely be live tomorrow night, and Mitch and I will definitely be here on Tuesday morning, breaking down the brackets, but maybe a bonus episode slipped in between there. So, All right, boys. Well, get some sleep or do some homework or maybe a combination of both, and then we'll talk soon.